Hi, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about the new changes with visa validity for certain countries, okay? If you or your loved ones travel to the US on a regular basis and you are from certain countries, just know that this new policy applies to you. So this may be that you are from Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, Ethiopia. If you're from one of those countries, just know that this policy applies to you. And you are going to now have a shorter time in the US, and you are going to be applying for more visas than you know what to do with. So let's talk about the actual memo and what we are seeing with those. So, like I said, if you are from Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Ethiopia, please know you're going to be seeing these changes as you apply for visas to the US, okay? And to even add to it, not only will you see changes when you apply for your visa, but when you're coming to the US, you're also going to have some changes to how long you can stay in the US. So basically, with this new policy, your visa is only good for one entry. That means once the officer issues you the visa, you can only enter the US one time with that visa. Okay, this is not a multi-entry visa, which is what all these countries have been so used to, right? When you go to their visa interview for your B1, B2 visa, you get in there, you present all your evidence and documents. The officer makes a decision and says, yes, you can get this visa to the US. Typically, it is a 5-year visa. There used to be like a 10-year visa where you can have multiple entries within that time frame. So if you have a 5-year visa, that means you can travel however many times you want into the US within those 5 years. And you just have to make sure that you follow the rules of entry and how long you can stay in the US. That is no longer the case for these specific countries, okay? For other countries, they will still get multi-entry visas, and we may see more countries added to this list. So we will, I will continue to update you when all these changes happen, but just know that for 4 specific countries, they're going into single entry visa. So once you get that visa and you use it, that's it. You will need to get a new one if you want to enter the US again. Okay. And also, once you enter the US, you can only stay in the US for up to 3 months. Let me even go further. When you get to the embassy and the officer gives you your visa, you're like, I'm coming into the US and I'm going to stay here for 6 months, right? And visit my family. Maybe you have family all over the US and you want to visit each state and see your family members. Well, you better cut down your travel plans. You're not going to be able to stay in the US for 6 months anymore. It is going to be 3 months. And when you come into the US, the officer at the airport can choose to give you less than 3 months. Okay, it is up to 3 months, not that you will automatically get 3 months. So it's really important to note that as well. The officer at the airport may give you the full 3 months, or they can give you a week, a month. It's really going to make it harder for you to plan ahead. Okay, so single entry visa, and you only get up to 3 months in the US. That is amazing. You get to the Adventurer 12 is saying that they were given a 2-year visa, but it's their fourth time. Luckily, it's a multi-entry. Congratulations. Because if you had your visa issued before this came out, you can still have your multi-entries, right? So let's say you had a 2-year visa or a 5-year visa that was issued before this whole thing happened. you can still use that visa until it expires. Once it expires, though, if this policy is still in place, that means you will only get that single entry visa and that 3 month stay in the US. Okay. But anyone that got theirs before that will get the full up to 6 months instead of up to 3 months, and they will still have their multi-entry. So I want to make sure that is clear. If you have your visa before this came up, you will still get your multi-entry and you will still get up to the 6 months. But if you are applying for a visa, if you're waiting for your visa to be issued, if you're thinking about applying for a visa, just know you are now limited to that single entry and up to 3 months stay in the US. Now, why, right? Why would the US want to do this? According to the US State Department, the reason for this is that these countries give US citizens and US nationals only a single entry with up to 3 months validity, up to 3 months stay in their countries. Well, after this came out, these countries decided to talk. And according to them, so Nigeria, for example, they give US citizens and US nationals 5-year multi-entry visa. Okay, 5-year multi-entry visa. So if the goal is to be on the same level as the other countries and say, okay, we're trying to be reciprocal with these other countries. So if you are only giving our people a single entry with 3 months, we're only going to give your people a single entry with 3 months stay. But these countries are saying, well, that's not what we do, though. We give you 5 years. So Nigeria, for example, gives 5 years multi-entry. Cameroon gives up to 1 year stay. Remember, US is up to 6 months stay. Cameroon gives up to 1 year stay. Ethiopia gives 90 days stay. And Ghana also gives multi-entry visas to US nationals. So I don't want to say the State Department is lying, but it looks like the State Department may be lying on the reason for this change. And that is actually not reciprocal, right? It's not reciprocal, because if we want it to be reciprocal, then we would match what the other countries are doing. So that is their why. And these countries are saying that the why is not the real reason, because that's not the truth. But again, we don't know why they're doing these things. But again, those countries are Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Ethiopia. These are the countries that are going to have this restriction. Other countries may be added to this, just like the travel ban. Other countries can be added to the travel ban. But for now, these are the only countries on this visa restriction thing. Listen, by putting it under the reciprocity schedule and saying that the reason that we're doing this is because we want to do what other countries are doing to our citizens, makes it less likely to get a legal challenge and if there's a legal challenge, to actually get it through and get it approved. So they know what they're doing. They know the reason that they're doing what they're doing. So just know, if you are applying for a new visa and you're from one of those countries, you are going to be limited to a single entry with up to 3 months stay. Now, what effect will this actually have? Of course, you are going to have a shorter stay in the US, but more than that, you are now going to go from applying for a visa every 5 years to applying for a visa every single time you want to come to the US. Okay. So if you have a multi-entry visa, you know that you apply, you have your 5 years, you can come in and out for those 5 years. With this single entry visa, it means that every single time you want to come to the US, right? Every single time you want to go to the US, you need to apply for a new visa. Okay, your visa is only good for one trip to the US. And for most people, this is going to affect them because you cannot plan ahead. You don't know if there's going to be an emergency, especially like business people, right, that have to travel to the US. They may be part of a multinational company that does meetings or have like things happen that requires them to travel to the US quickly on a short notice. This is going to affect that because places like Nigeria, you cannot even get a B1, B2 visa interview until 2027. Okay. So if every single time you need to come to the US, you need to apply for this visa, but the closest visa interview you're going to get is not for a few years. That means this is essentially keeping people from being able to travel to the US. Okay. So it's really, really important that we don't just talk about the fact that, oh, it's just going to shorten your stay in the US, or, oh, it's just, okay, you can always apply for another visa. Yes, right? Yes, in theory, you can always apply for another visa after your first entry with that initial visa. However, depending on the country that you're applying for a visa through, if the only country you qualify to apply for your visa in is, let's say, I'm going to keep using Nigeria for an example, is Nigeria, and they do not have a visa interview appointment available to till 2027, but you need to be in the US in a couple months for a business thing, you are now officially out of luck. Okay, you will need to wait for that visa appointment to get that one single entry to then be able to come to the US. And by then, if it is business thing that you literally have to be in the US for, you have lost that business opportunity. Okay, so it is one of those things that I really want people to keep in mind. I know I'm talking about the B1, B2 visas, but this also applies to F1 visas, okay? So typically an F1 visa, you get it for a few years. You can go back home during, like, you know, some students go home during summer and then come back for the fall and spring semesters. Now, if you choose to leave the US, you want to come back on that F1 visa, you need to go through the embassy and apply for a new F1 visa. So you're applying for a visa over and over and over if you're from one of these 4 countries. All right. This is going to cause people to basically have to decide whether to spend their summers in the US and spend their full education career in the US, or go home and visit their families. And this is even harder for people because of how long it takes to get those visa interviews. So yes, you may be sitting there and saying, well, people can just apply for a new visa every single time, but they may not have the ability to apply for a new visa. And if you are in a situation where you may have some family in the US that you want to visit, you may not be able to do that because, again, you are in a situation where you cannot apply for a visa because there's no visa interviews available. So even though you have that single entry, you are going to be more limited with your ability to come to the US to apply for that visa to the US. Okay. So, as always, if you have questions, please, 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 please let me know in the comments. And, you know, sometimes I get the questions like, can I still use my current visa? Yes, you can still use your current visa. If you have a multi-entry, you can still use it multiple times. You can still get up to 6 months, which was the initial conditions for your visa. But once that visa expires, you are now out of luck. Okay. This, of course, only affects non-immigrant visas. I have to say that as well. If you are, you know, applying for an immigrant visa, meaning a visa that will lead to permanent residency in the US, this does not apply to you. This only applies to non-immigrant visas, people that are coming to the US for a visit, for student, for something short, okay, a very short visit in the US. Those are the people affected by this visa. Can, you know, sometimes people ask, can I, you know, appeal for a longer visa? No, you cannot, you know, make the government make your specific visas longer. Will this change back? It could, right? The US government can choose to change this because this is policy, not law. So the US government can decide tomorrow, right? They can decide tomorrow to end this whole restriction and put it back to what it was, or to tweak it a little bit. They can keep doing that. So this is all policy, not actual law. And unfortunately, the presidency, the executive branch, gets to determine what that is. So, that is the process when it comes to this. So you want to make sure that you are basically, you know, the restrictions, so that when you're applying for that visa, you are giving yourself the best possible opportunity to get it approved. Because one thing you need to know about non-immigrant visas, you get that one interview to prove to the officer that you meet all the requirements. And if you're not able to do that, you can end up having your visa denied. So what can you actually do when you do have that visa interview? Remember, this is a single entry visa. So every single time you are able to get a visa interview, that may be your, your last time to get the interview for another few years. So you want to give yourself the best possible opportunity to get it approved. Okay. So you want to make sure that you are gathering all your required documents, making sure that you have a strong case before you even apply. And what do I mean by a strong case? For non-immigrant visas, they're looking at whether you, the person applying for the visa, not your family member in the US sponsoring you, not anyone else, you that is applying for the visa, do you meet the requirement? Can you show that you have sufficient ties to your country? So if you're from Nigeria, can you show that you have sufficient ties to Nigeria that once you're done with your visit, you will go back? That's really the key. And the more things you have going for you, the more things you can use to show that ties to your country, the better opportunity you have to have that visa approved. So it is one of those things that, people always ask me, oh, I have a family friend in Nigeria, in Ghana, and I want to file for them to come to the US for a visit. You, the US citizen in the US, cannot file for someone to visit. Oh, the chat is active. I am seeing it. I just want to get through these points and then I will answer your questions. But the chat is definitely active, okay? So one thing I want to make sure you know is when you are applying for that visa, remember, places like Nigeria, if you don't get your visa and you need to reapply, you're going to have to wait at least a couple years before you can get that visa interview. So you want to make sure that you are going ahead and having sufficient evidence of your ties. And if you do not have sufficient evidence yet, you can do certain things to get you there, okay? Employment is a big one. If you are young and your family is not rich and you do not have employment, you are not getting a B1, B2 visa. I want to make that very clear. And people always want to, push back on that. But a young person with no spouse, no kids, barely out of college or university, trying to apply for a visa to the US, how are they going to show that they have sufficient ties unless they have family that has, incredible history as far as finances are concerned, that they will not need to be in the US because they have so much money. I always like to use, like, if you are Dangote's daughter, right? You're going to get a visa to the US. You're going to get a B1, B2 visa to the US, no problem. However, if you are, your parents do not have any money and cannot show those ties, you're not going to get that visa. So it's really important that As you're thinking about applying for these visas, you are looking at the requirements and making sure that you meet the requirements, or that you start taking steps to help you meet the requirements in the future. All right. So thank you all so much for joining me. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. I do answer your questions, and I will get to the questions now. So put them in the comments. All right. So Damien, your EAD C9 concurrently estimated online says 3 months now. It's 5 months, still no decision. Can I do an inquiry now or wait until the 6 months when it's officially outside of normal processing time? So unfortunately, I'm sorry. So unfortunately, when you're on that online account, it is so not accurate. Okay. So it is going to fluctuate. It may say 5 months today, and then you go in like a week from now, it says 3 months or it says 7 months. It's not accurate. And you cannot do a service request based on the online account. You have to go with the normal processing time. So until your case is actually outside normal processing time, you cannot do that service request. So, excuse me, wait till your case is outside normal processing time, and then you can do the service request. But please, I'm going to tell you what I tell my clients. Do not look at that that processing time on your USCIS, on the My USCIS online account, and think that it is accurate. Okay, and it's not. The technology is still in beta testing, so it is not at all the reality of what's going on. So just know that before you start relying on it. Okay, so servant of God. I'm the preparer for my spouse's I-130 online and I-130A forms. How do I sign it? Okay. All right. So let me show this one first. So you are preparing an I-130 for your spouse and you want to know how do you sign it. So if you are the petitioner, okay, so I'm going to answer it because I'm not really clear on who the petitioner is and who the beneficiary is in your question. So if you're the petitioner and you're filing an I-130 online, once you are done filling out all the sections, once your spouse has completed the I-130A and signed it, and you upload that I-130A as part of the evidence, it has you review and submit. When you go to review and submit, at the end of it, it has you sign, and you're signing online. Okay, you are signing online. However, that I-130A needs to be printed, signed by your spouse, then you scan it, upload it as part of the evidence section. Okay, so that's for the I-130A, but for the I-130 itself that you're filing online, you sign it online. You do not need to print it and sign it. Now, if your spouse is the petitioner, right? If your spouse is the petitioner and helping them actually fill out the forms, then there is a section at the beginning that asks, did someone help you prepare this form? And they will say yes, put your information. And then at the end, when they go through that review, it will ask for the preparer to print and sign. So you would print the document, sign it, and then upload it back up as the preparer. However, if you're the petitioner, you're not also the preparer, it's your application. So you're preparing it for yourself. Just because you're filing for someone else doesn't mean that you're a preparer. Okay. Trending views asks, what about EB2? So EB2 is an employment-based visa, and that is an immigrant visa. It is not a non-immigrant visa. This restriction only applies to non-immigrant visas. So an EB2 is an immigrant visa, and this restriction does not apply to immigrant visas. So I hope that gives you some relief. Okay. So Adventurer 12 is asking how to apply for a work permit. In order to apply for a work permit in the US, you need to have a specific status or you need to have an application pending. So for example, over here with Damien, where he's asking about the C9, so that's the category that he's filing under. And that category is for someone that has an adjustment of status application pending, meaning you have a green card application that you filed, and based on that green card application, you qualify to apply for a work authorization. So that is the way that you would be able to apply for a work authorization in the US, is that you need to make sure that you have that other thing that you're filing for, or that you have a status that allows you to apply for a work authorization. So if you're in the US, for example, on a B1, B2 visa, you would not qualify for a work authorization in the US unless you are changing your status to something else that allows you to work in the US, or you are adjusting your status to that of a green card holder. Mm, okay, how can you change? Okay, how can I change my status? Currently, I'm B1, B2. So it's going to depend on, oh, I'm sorry. There's just a lot of things coming up. All right. It's going to depend. Changing your status is going to depend on what to do and what your plan is. I usually ask people like, what's your long-term goal with your, with your status, with your state in the US? Because here's the one thing I want you to keep in mind. If you overstay your visa in the US, options go from just like open to very, very narrow. So it's really important that you plan ahead and know what it is that you want to achieve at the end of it before you apply for any sort of visas in the US. Okay. Now, if you want to change to, let's say, a student visa, you want to get that going as soon as possible because you have to apply for school. You need to get admission. You need to get an I-20. Then you need to apply for a change of status from a B1, B2 to a student, an F1. Okay. You have to do that while your state is still valid. This is going to be harder now that for the new visa, for people that are issued visas under this new policy, because they will only have up to 2 months, whereas before people had up to 6 months to apply for the school, get admission, get the I-20, change their status, right? But now you only have 3 months, so you really have to think ahead or plan ahead, okay? So if you want to change your status, you can, but you want to basically have a plan for it and start the process of doing that. So like I say, a B1, B2 can change status to F1. The only thing is most of the time when people come here and they want to change status, it's typically so they can get a work authorization. As F1 student, you can work on campus, so within your school for up to 20 hours, and that's it. Okay. If that is not going to work for you, then an F1 is not going to be the option for you, because if you work outside of those parameters, you are violating your F1 and you can be terminated and have your visa revoked. So just keep all of those things in mind. But can you change your status? Absolutely. You just need to go through the process and really think it through. Um, is it normal for work permit to take 5 to 6 months to be approved? Because I see people apply long after at the same field office and get approved, but now I'm worried it's too. So here's the thing: the work permit is not approved at the field office. It's approved at the service center level. Okay, so when you file all your applications, it's typically sent to a service center, and then your green card application is eventually sent to the field office for an interview and a final decision. It is your work authorization is never sent to the field office. It's done at the service center level. The normal processing time, what I tell people, is 6 to 8 months. I don't care what the website says, it's 6 to 8 months. If you have a job offer, so this, if you haven't watched my how to expedite cases video, watch that too. But if you have a job offer that is conditioned on you being able to work legally in the US and have a work permit and have a social security number, you can use that job offer to request an expedite. So that's typically what we try to do for our clients. If they do have a job offer, we try to do an expedite. It does take time, right? The work permit takes time without any other interventions. So you want to look at if you could potentially qualify for an expedite. So an expedite requires some form of emergency or urgency. It can be, in this case, it'll be like financial, like I have this job, it's a US job, but I can't take it because I don't have a social, because I have a work authorization. So in those situations, you want to make sure that you are going ahead and seeing if you can get that job offer and ask for an expedite if you qualify for an expedite. But yes, it is frustrating how long it takes. And yes, every single case is not the same. It could go to a field office, a service center where they are just like running through those quickly, or it could be at a service center where they just are not. So there's not really a way to control that, but being able to do an expedite request if you qualify for it is a way that you can at least have some control in this process. Servant of God, yes, if you are the petitioner, the one that it's your I-130 and your spouse is the beneficiary, then you are not a preparer. So a preparer would be like, for our office, for our clients, I would be prepared because I'm the one filling out the forms for my clients and sending it to them to sign. So I would, before it even, so when we prepare I-130s online for our clients, I would put that I'm the preparer, put all the client information. I would then have to sign as the preparer and then send it off to the client for them to sign. So, but if it's your own, you're not also the preparer. It's just your forms. Mhm. Malik, 45 days after interview, not really. I typically say 90 days, right? Once you get to 90 days after interview, and you have some recourse, meaning then you can really take steps. Okay. Listen, I I understand the frustration, but yes, it can take longer than that. And typically the offices, they can say whatever they want at the interview. The reality is the reality, and your reality right now, unfortunately, is that um, you have to wait for that to be approved, right? You you can't really control what the officer tells you versus what actually happens in reality, right? So what I would say is typically in our office, after an interview, we give them 90 days, and then we start the service request, reaching out to congressperson and all of that. So you can choose to do those things where you do a service request, or reach out to your congressperson and see if they're willing to reach out to USCIS on your behalf. But is it normal? Yes, it's normal. We've had cases where it took way longer than that, but with after the 90 days, we were able to do a service request and get it back on track. But it is it normal? Yes. Should you worry? It depends on, I know you asked this question the last live. And it really comes down to the situation, right? I remember you saying that it wasn't, there wasn't anything that went wrong in your interview. So in those situations, it could just be that it's just the officer didn't push it through or didn't press a button. So I would say service request and reach out to your congressperson for help if the service request does not lead to a decision being made. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate prayers always. So thank you. If you have any questions, I believe I covered all questions I saw here. But if you have any questions, please, please, please put them in the comments. I am here to answer your questions. Make sure you understand what's going on, especially with these new changes, and make sure that you are getting the information you need. There's a lot of misinformation within all of this. So I want to make sure that it is clear what's going on. So if you are from Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, and Ethiopia, and you're applying for a visa to the US, a non-immigrant visa, so a B1 visa, an F1 visa, things like that, and you go to your visa interview, you can only be approved for a single entry visa, meaning you can only enter the US one time with that visa, and you can only have a stay of up to 3 months. Again, this is going to be different for student visa holders because you're going to get duration of status and you're going to work, you're going to go to school and you're going to be able to maintain your F1 status in the US. However, for a B1, B2 visa holder that's coming to the US for a visit, that visit is going to now be limited to 3 months. And you can only enter the US one time with that visa. However, if you currently have a visa already, a multi-entry visa, you can still use your multi-entry visa until it expires. Okay, so let's say right before this was issued, you got your 5-year visa, multi-entry, and you plan to visit the US at least once or twice a year for the next 5 years. You can still do that. Okay, it does not stop you from doing that with a visa that's already issued. These are for only new visas. Okay, new visas are going to have this limitation, so you want to make sure that if you're applying for these visas that you are taking steps to make sure that you qualify and that you have all your documentation in place when you go for your visa interview, because now you only get that one entry. And another thing to know about that one entry is depending on the country, right? There's 4 countries, but depending on the country, when you use your one entry and now you want to go and apply for a visa again, you may be in a position where it's going to take you a couple years to get an interview for that new visa. So it's not going to be just as simple as coming into the US with your single entry visa, leaving and immediately applying for another visa and being able to come back like 6 months later. That's not going to be the case, especially for Nigerians. I'm sorry, you're not getting an interview till like 2027 for a B1, B2 visa. So that's going to really affect businesses, individuals, families that want to, that travel back and forth, businesses that have US components that they need to literally come to the US for conferences, come to the US for training, things like that. That is time sensitive. They cannot even plan ahead and be like, let's get a multi-entry visa so that we can go to these things or, go to these meetings to get, jobs or things like that. They can't even plan ahead anymore because if their person, right, if their employee does not already have a visa, they can only get one entry. So they have to constantly be applying for visas for their employees to be able to come to the US. So this is a big change. Okay, this is a big change. these countries, their governments are trying to fight it. They're trying to negotiate with the US government to get this changed. Because again, the US government is saying that the reason that they have this restriction is because these countries also have these restrictions. And according to these countries, they do not have these restrictions. They give multi-year visas, they give multi-entry visas, they give up to like a year stay in some situations in their country. But the US is saying that these countries are given the same restrictions, and that is just not accurate, unfortunately. Right? That's normal now. It is not accurate. So these countries are going to try to fight it and try to get it reversed. What it will take to get it reversed, we do not know. How long it will take, we do not know. But once, if, right, if that happens, if there's any changes or on this, I will bring it to you, because again, this is something that is constantly shifting, and we're going to see how much it shifts or if this changes. Just like the travel ban, they're still considering in other countries to these restrictions, to the travel ban. So it is going to be a constantly evolving situation, and I will continue bringing it to you. All right. If this video helped you, please share it with someone you know that needs to hear this. Immigration is changing, and staying informed is literally the best defense that you can have, because the more you know, the better you are able to plan, and the better you can actually take advantage of the immigration system and make sure that it works for you and not against you. If you would like to schedule a private consultation with me, you can do that by going to my website, lilylo.com. You can schedule right on the website. If you click on contact us, you can actually pick a date and time that works best for you, for us to talk about your case. And you can see my calendar and see when I'm available and schedule that consultation. We offer two structures. We offer a free 15-minute session and then a paid session as well. So feel free to pick the one that works best for you. All right. So Malik, great. Yeah. So when you check your case status, I've had cases stuck on like scheduled for an interview even after we've had the interview. It's not you. It's not you. It's something within USCIS and their system and their technology that does that. Okay. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. It doesn't mean they're going to schedule a new interview for you. It just means that something on the back end has not updated. And we've had situations where it was stuck on that, and then the next thing we got a decision. So like, it does happen. Okay. All right, so August 2024, my husband's case was sent for visa processing. Now that he was approved by the NDC, when will he get interview date? Also, while we are waiting, can he come visit me in the US? His case is in Nigeria. Okay, so how long will it take? It's going to depend. So we have an interview coming up this month for a client, and they were documentally qualified in 2023. So it is taking at least a year and a half, minimum a year and a half, to get an interview in Nigeria. Okay, up to years. I say 2 years, but I'll say at least, at the very minimum, a year and a half to get an interview at the U.S. Embassy in Lagos. Okay, that's just the normal over there right now, and that is for immediate relatives of U.S. citizens. Okay, I'm not talking. I want to make it very clear: immediate relatives of U.S. citizens, we're saying about minimum a year and a half up to 2 years to get a visa interview in Lagos. But if you're filing for a spouse, it's going to take way longer than that. Okay. But is it Do you have to wait more? Unfortunately, yes, you do have to wait some more. And then can he apply for a visiting visa? He can, but right now to get a visa to the US, to get an interview for a B1, B2 visa for Lagos is like 2027. So he'll probably have his green card before he gets the interview for the B1, B2. Can he? Yes. Right? Can he? Yes, technically he can. He does have to show that he has sufficient ties to Nigeria and has no interest, zero interest of being in the US longer than he's given. Again, that's going to be very hard to prove when you have an immigrant visa pending that will lead to a green card. Okay. It's going to be very hard for him to get the visa, and it's going to take time for him to get the visa interview. But like he's able to do the visa interview quickly, he still has to show that he has non-immigrant intent. He has no intentions of living in the US. Having an immigrant visa pending is going to make that harder for him to prove. All right. What about Ghana? How long do you think it takes once submitted? So, want to make a couple things clear here. So, I know you asked earlier about the I-130. Listen, you have to get through the I-130 first before you even get to the visa interview. Okay. The I-130 right now for a spouse, we're seeing up to a year for the I-130 to be approved. And then once that I-130 is approved, then you start the consular processing, so the visa processing. And for those, we're seeing about a year right now in Ghana. Ghana is always a little faster than Nigeria when it comes to these, because Ghana did not have a travel ban during the last Trump administration, and Ghana's embassy was able to start processing visas faster than the Nigerian embassy. So Nigeria has much longer backlogs than Ghana does. And remember, population as well. Nigeria has a lot of population, way more than Ghana. So that also affects the processing time. But you need to think about the I-130 first, getting that approved, and then worry about getting the interview, because all of this changes every single year, okay, every single month, right? How quickly they're processing cases changes every single month. So you don't want to like hold whatever I'm saying today for something that may happen like a year from now, okay? A year from now, and we will be able to update you, okay? All right. So remember, if you have questions, put them in the comments. And if I do not see any questions, I want to thank you all so much for joining me. As always, remember to like this video, share this video. This is an important thing that people know about, especially if you have family or friends in Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, or Cameroon that want to come to the US. They want to apply for non-immigrant visa to come and visit or go to school here. They really need to know what this new policy says, what they need to be aware of before they file that application. So I want to thank you all so much for joining me. I don't see any new questions. I will be seeing you next week. And then on Tuesday, you're going to be getting a new video where I'll be talking about the new denaturalization memo, which basically is going to cause US citizens, naturalized US citizens, to lose their citizenship and potentially end up in deportation proceedings. So that's going to be today's video. Join me next week, and I will answer more of your questions. Thank you all so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.